Okay, I will continue the material about linguistic and social variation. Once we have identified the linguistic variable as our basic working tools, the next task becomes one of employing that tools in an effort to see how linguistic variation relate to social variation. An early study of linguistic variation by Gumpers in 1958, but one case in a modern mold saw some of the intercases involved in trying to relate linguistic variation to social variation, because the society he was studying in rigidly stratified on the basis of caste membership. The problems are considerably wider than those encountered in such cities as New York, Detroit, or even Norwich, but they are still present. Gamper saw how rather small difference in speech can effectively distinguish a subgroup in society from one another in a study of linguistic usage in the village of Kalapur, 80 miles north of Delhi in India. The social structure of the village is determined by Hindu caste membership with Brahmans at the tops. Then Rajput has warrior, Vaishya has merchant, and several groups of artisans and labor lower down. At the bottom are three untouchable castes. Chamara has landless labor, Jatiya Chamars has leather workers and shoemaker, and the last and Bangis has a sweeper. The latter are restricted to living in certain neighborhood and have less freedom to move in the village than do members of the upper castes. Then percent of the population are not Hindus but Muslim. They are outside the caste system. So far as language is concerned, certain characteristics of the Kalapur village dialect are clear markers of social group membership. For example, Bangis don't make certain phonological contrast the speaker of all the other classes make. Kamar and Jatiya Kamar also lack certain phonological contrast made by all others, and some, in attempting to make such a contrast, actually that is they overextend and particular usage in trying to emulate others. Jatiya Kamars have a characteristic pronunciation of words that end in a in all other village varieties. Each of the three untouchable cases therefore has speech characteristics that clearly set it off both from the others two untouchable cases and from the touchable cases in the village. Muslim speech resemble that of the touchable classes. Okay, the next slide is an anomaly is that the variety of village speech spoken by the low castes. The Bangis is close to the dialect of the region in which Kalapur is situated. These fake constrain members of the upper castes in their use of the regional dialect, since using it would make them sound like untouchable in their linguistic uh, usage. Therefore, they are forced to innovate away from the regional variety, sign untouchable, apparently try to emulate the touchable. The direction of innovation for all groups in Kalapur is away from the regional variety within the innovation prompted. Of course, by different net, the touchable need to signal their clear distinction from the untouchables, and the untouchable attempt to reduce that distinction as much as possible. Okay, the next slide is this study quite clearly saw a direct relationship between linguistic variation and caste membership. If we know certain things about one, we can predict certain things about the others. It is just such connection or correlation that interests sociolinguistic working with the linguistic variable. What they seek are measures of social variation to which they can relate the kind of linguistic variation they observe. However, caste with its sharp social certification is useless as a measure of social variation outside a few non-Western society. Consequently, the problem becomes consequently, the problem becomes one of finding factor in society that show a relationship to such matters as whether or not an individual say singing or sing in, he go or he goes, or he doesn't know anything or he don't know nothing. Okay, the next slide is what we find is that people are assigned to social classes through the use of composite score derived from various scales, which measure some of the factors mentioned above. It is also the case that the actual scales used must necessarily vary from community to community. Sign exactly the same characteristic cannot serve to classify people in England and the United States or in New England and New Mexico. However, as I have indicated, nearly all such scales take into account such matters as educational achievement, professional training, occupations, or sometimes parental occupation too, blue or white collar, work salary or income level, a source of that salary income, or wage. This different also being important, gender, age, residential area, range, and ethnicity. A wage are then assigned to each of these and some kind of unitary scale in device so that individual can be fit into slot carrying such destination as upper class, middle class, lower working class, and so on. Sometimes the certification or gradation are few upper versus middle class, but at other time there are many upper middle versus middle class. Most work in sociolinguistic has drawn on commonly used unitary scale of this kind to design the social class membership of individual in an attempt to describe the characteristic linguistic behavior of various social classes. Okay, the next slide is in his study of linguistic variation in New York City, LaBeouf in 1966 used the three criteria of education, occupation, and income to set up 10 social classes. His class 0, his lower class, had grade school education or less, were laborers and found it difficult to make ends meet. His classes 1 to 5, his working class had some high school education, were blue collar workers but learned enough to own such things as cars. His classes 6 to 8, his lower middle class, were high school graduates and semi-professional and white-collar workers who could send their children to college. His highest class 9 is upper middle class were well educated and professional or business oriented. And this classification system for people in the United States, about 10% of the population are said to be lower class, about 14% working class, another 14% lower middle class, and the remaining 10% fall into the upper middle class or an upper class, the latter not included in LaBeouf study. In his later study in 2001 of variation in Philadelphia, LaBeouf used a social economy index based on occupation, education, and household value. Okay, the last slide is it was for a reason not unlike this that Milroy in 1987 preferred to explore network relationship and the possible connection of these two linguistic variation rather than to use the concept of social class. In her work, Milroy found that it was the network of relationship that an individual belonged to the exert the most powerful and interesting influence on that individual's linguistic behavior. When the group of speakers being investigated saw little variation in social class, however, that is defined a study of the network of social relationship within the group may allow you to discover of how particular linguistic usage can be related to the frequent and density of certain kinds of contact among speakers. Network relationship however, tend to be unique in a way that social class categories are not. That is, not two networks are alike, and network structure vary from place to place and group to group, like in Belfast and Boston, or among Jamaica immigration to London and Old Etonia. But whom a person associates with regular may be more real than any feeling he or she has of belong to this or that social class. Okay, I think enough for my presentation. I will back to moderator. Thank you.